Welcome to Church of God Jesus Witnesses. Today I would like to share the Word of God through the study titled Date Calculation of the Lord's Feast, Chapter 8. We must understand the sacred calendar to find the exact date of the annual appointed feasts. However, since the feast was largely abolished and altered by the Catholics of the Middle Ages, and the period was over 1,000 years old, it seems almost impossible for us to find the sacred calendar. It is also not easy to find out what kinds of feasts existed, and even if you get to know some of the feasts, it is difficult to find the exact dates. Let's take the Passover as an example. More churches are appearing around the world trying to celebrate the Passover. However, most of them do not know how to calculate the date in the way the Bible tells us, so they celebrate the Passover according to the date that Judaism keeps. However, it would be surprising if you hear that the Bible contains all the principles and standards of the sacred calendar, which is needed to find the exact date of the Lord's feasts. The Church of God Jesus Witnesses thanks to the Lord, who has allowed us to calculate the exact date of the feasts based on the principles of the Bible. Is it the sacred calendar, the lunar or the solar? What is the reference point for a month? The new moon or the full moon? What is the Bible calendar? Lunisolar calendar or lunar calendar? What is the standard for the first month of the year? What is the principle of the leap month? When does the day of 24 hours start? Is it the sacred calendar, the lunar or the solar? The Bible tells us in the book of Psalms whether God's feast is based on lunar or solar. God said that the feast was set according to the moon's operation. Let's turn to Psalms chapter 104 verse 19 to see that the feast was set according to the moon's operation. He made the moon to mark the seasons, and the sun knows when to go. Psalms chapter 81 verse 3 says to sound the ram's horn at the new moon, and when the moon is full, on the day of our feast. The book of Psalms shows that the Israelites used the new moon and full moon to calculate the feasts. These records indicate that the Israelites used the lunar calendar established by the moon's operation. In addition, it can be seen that the concept of the time of 1 month is based on 2 knots, new moon and full moon during the operation of the moon. What is the reference point for a month? The new moon or the full moon? Which one is the starting point of 1 month? The time when the moon and the sun are in the same direction is called the new moon, and the time when the moon and the sun are in opposite directions around the earth is called the full moon. The time duration from the new moon to the next new moon or from the full moon to the next full moon is called the synodic month. The average length of the synodic month is 29.53 days. Earth's orbit around the sun is elliptical. If the Earth orbits quickly at a distance close to the sun, the moon also follows the Earth and orbits for longer, resulting in a longer synodic month. Therefore, depending on the change in the distance between the Earth and the sun, the length of the synodic month is changeable by approximately 29.2 to 29.8 days. In the case of the lunar calendar worldwide, the day at which the new moon is located is defined as the beginning of the month. This principle applies equally to the sacred calendar when calculating the Lord's feasts. This principle is confirmed by the fact that the Israelites recognized the new moon and the first day of a month as the same day. In Numbers chapter 28 verse 11 it says that on the first of every month, new moon, present to the Lord a burnt offering of 2 young bulls, 1 ram and 7 male lambs a year old, all without defect. And in Chronicles chapter 2 verse 4 it says, Behold, I am about to build a house for the name of the Lord my God, dedicating it to him, to burn fragrant incense before him and to set out the showbread continually, and to offer burnt offerings morning and evening, on Sabbaths and on new moons and on the appointed feasts of the Lord our God, this being required forever in Israel. It was a rule for the Israelites to offer a burnt offering on the new moon every month. God established the ordinances to offer sacrifices at the appointed time. According to God-given ordinances, there was the daily burnt offering, the Sabbath day burnt offering, and the new moon burnt offering. The important fact here was that on the day when 2 or more sacrifices overlap, each offering had to be offered separately. For example, on the Sabbath day, not only were the Sabbath sacrifices offered, but the daily offerings were also offered separately. In Numbers chapter 28 verse 11 it says that on the Sabbath day, make an offering of 2 lambs a year old without defect, together with its drink offering and a grain offering of 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil. 10. This is the burnt offering for every Sabbath, in addition to the regular burnt offering and its drink offering. In addition, on the Sabbath day, the Israelites offered the burnt offering of 2 lambs and also the regular daily burnt offering together. In the same way, on the new moon, the Israelites offered the burnt offering for the new moon and offered the regular daily burnt offering separately. In Numbers chapter 28 verse 11 and 15 it says that on the first of every month, present to the Lord a burnt offering of 2 young bulls, 1 ram and 7 male lambs a year old, all without defect. 15. Besides the regular burnt offering with its drink offering, 1 male goat is to be presented to the Lord as a sin offering. The Israelites offered a burnt offering on the new moon and the regular daily burnt offering separately with its drink offering. There were also the ordinances of the Feast of Trumpet. The regular daily burnt offering and the new moon burnt offering must be done on the first day of the 7th month separately from the sacrifice for the Feast of Trumpet. In Numbers chapter 28 verse 1 and 6 it says that on the first day of the 7th month hold a sacred assembly, and do no regular work. It is a day for you to sound the trumpets. 6. These are in addition to the monthly, new moon, and burnt offerings. What is the Bible calendar? Lunisolar calendar or lunar calendar? Among the feasts of God, there is the Feast of First Fruit, which is the day after the Sabbath that comes just after the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The Feast of First Fruit is a feast to set the day of the week, so the date is somewhat different every year. According to the ordinance of the feast, when the Israelites reap their harvest, they have to bring to the priest a sheaf of the first grain they harvest. In Leviticus chapter 23 verse 6 and 10 through 11. On the 15th day of that month the Lord's feast of unleavened bread begins. For 7 days you must eat bread made without yeast. When you enter the land I am going to give you and you reap its harvest, bring to the priest a sheaf of the first grain you harvest. He is to wave the sheaf before the Lord so it will be accepted on your behalf. The priest is to wave it on the day after the Sabbath. To bring a sheaf of the first grain they harvest, the Feast of First Fruit should be observed in the proper season for the wheat harvest. To meet the season for the wheat harvest, the sacred calendar must be the lunisolar calendar. The Israelites had to keep the Feast of First Fruit to bring a sheaf of the first grain they harvested. It means that they couldn't rest for the harvest. Unlike the other feasts, the day after the Sabbath was not a day of rest, but rather a day of harvest. In 1 Corinthians chapter 16 verses 1 and 2 says now about the collection for God's people, do what I told the Galatian churches to do. On the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with his income, saving it up, so that when I come no collections will have to be made. We can see that God is pleased with the first fruit, and we are instructed to do as the Galatian churches did. We are to set aside income earned on the first day of every week as an offering to the church. What is the standard for the first month of a year? At the time of Exodus, God told Moses which month the first month of the year was. On the 14th of that month, God brought the 10th last plague to the Egyptians. After Pharaoh received the final plague during Passover, he allowed the Israelites to leave Egypt. The Israelites' exodus occurred on the 15th of the very first month. In Exodus chapter 120 verses 1 and 2 the Lord said to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, this month is to be for you the first month of your year. Which season did God tell Moses was the first month of the year? If you look closely at the records of the 10 plagues that fell upon Egypt at that time, you can find a key to know which season it was. It says in Exodus chapter 9 verse 25, and verses 31 through 32 that throughout Egypt hail struck everything in the fields, both men and animals. It beat down everything growing in the fields and stripped every tree. 31 The flax and barley were destroyed since the barley had headed and the flax was in bloom. The wheat and spelt, however, were not destroyed, because they ripened later. Hail was the 7th plague in Egypt. The previous verse records the damage to the various crops caused by the hail disaster. The record that barley comes out and the flowers bloom shows that the season of the hail disaster was during spring. After all 10 plagues, the Israelites left Egypt on the first month of the year and crossed the Red Sea. The day when the Israelites crossed the Red Sea was instituted as the appointed feast to bring to the priest a sheaf of the first grain. The grain was of wheat, and it was during the spring season. Let's take a look at once more Leviticus chapter 23 verse 10. Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I am going to give you and you reap its harvest, bring to the priest a sheaf of the first grain you harvest. And in Exodus chapter 34 verse 22 it says to celebrate the Feast of Weeks with the first fruits of the wheat harvest. God announced the first month of the year and delivered the Israelites from Egypt in that month. The feasts of God were instituted according to the works of Moses, who delivered the Israelites from Egypt. And the season of the first month was spring. So why did God set the first month of the year for the spring season? It was from the time of creation that God made the sun and moon to serve as signs to mark seasons, days, and years. All of them were given by the operation of the universe, that is, the operation of the sun, moon, and stars. We can say that God's feast was already scheduled from the time of creation. In Genesis, chapter 1 verse 14, God said, "Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to make sacred times, days, and years." Through the creation of 6 days, God created a day of 24 hours. He called the light day, and the darkness He called night. God also created the time of 1 month through the orbit of the moon, and the 4 seasons through the orbit of the earth. At each of those time frames, there are some knots to measure the time. In the case of a day, sunrise is the starting point of the day. Sunrise completes a day of 24 hours by passing the sunset and becoming a new sunrise. In the case of a month, the new moon becomes the starting point of the month. When the new moon passes through the full moon and falls into the next new moon, a month is completed. The concept of periodic repetition, day or month, was understood by the ancients as a cycle of the birth and death of life. They considered that light was the source of life, and it was their concept that the appearance of light meant birth, and the disappearance of light meant death. The sunrise is the beginning of the light, that is, the birth of life, so the starting point of a day must be sunrise. Once you understand such the principles of creation, you can understand that the starting point of a month must be the new moon. Let's look at the changes in the 4 seasons while thinking about the cycle of the birth and death of life. Spring is the season of birth when all things give birth, and winter is the season of death when all life enters into the ground. Therefore, based upon the principle of creation, the starting point of a year must be during the spring season. As we reviewed already, there are the knots of every time frame. In the case of a year, the knot of the spring season is the vernal equinox. In the spring season, there can be no other knot except for the vernal equinox. In summary, it is a natural concept that follows the principle of creation, that the vernal equinox is the standard for determining the first month of a year. The same concept applies to the starting point of a day, or a month. We can also confirm even in the Bible that the vernal equinox is the starting point of the year. In 2 Samuel chapter 11 verse 1 and in 1 Chronicles chapter 20 verse 1 it said that in the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men. In the spring was translated as after the year was expired in the King James Version. This is the biblical evidence that the beginning of the year of the sacred calendar is based on the vernal equinox. In 1 Kings chapter 20 verse 22, next spring the king of Aram will attack you again. Next spring was translated as at the return of the year in the King James Version and the New American Standard Bible. The Bible confirms that the beginning of the year is in the spring. In 2 Chronicles chapter 36 verse 10 it says that in the spring, King Nebuchadnezzar sent for him and brought him to Babylon. In the spring was translated as when the year was expired. In the King James Version. At the turn of the year. In the New American Standard Bible. In the spring of the year. In the New Revised Standard Bible. It is these passages that confirm that the beginning of the year is in the spring. What is the principle of the leap month? The lunisolar calendar is the lunar calendar which is adjusted to match the seasons of the solar calendar. To match the 12 synodic months with one solar year, The extra leap month is needed for every 3 years. If you calculate correctly, it will be 7 extra months every 19 years. The important issue here is the location where we have to put the extra month throughout the year. If you study God's feast in the Bible, God has established 7 feasts from the first month through the 7th month of the sacred calendar. All of those feasts were established to commemorate Moses' deeds during the period of their exodus, and became a shadow of what Christ would do in the future. In the course of Moses' deeds, there was a period of 120 days from the day Moses went up to Mount Sinai to receive the first 10 commandments, the Feast of Weeks, the 11th day of the 3rd month, to the day he received the second 10 commandments, the Day of Atonement, the 10th day of the 7th month. Since Moses' deed of 120 days was a shadow for Jesus, it is impossible to put the extra month in the middle of that period. Today, Jews consider the leap month as the month of Adar, which is the last month of the year. They call it the second Adar. Their custom looks so biblical not to undermine the will of God. In the case of the Korean lunisolar calendar, the leap month can be located on any of the 12 synodic months. If you follow the Korean method, the 7th month of the sacred calendar would be changed into the 8th month. It will take around 150 days from the Feast of Unleavened Bread to the Feast of Tabernacles. If then, the date of the Feast of Tabernacles will be 1 month delayed from the Bible. When does the day of 24 hours start? As already explained, the starting point of a day is sunrise. The starting point of a month is the new moon. It means that the day which contains the exact time of the new moon is the first day of the month. We should be careful when setting the day because the biblical starting point of a day is different from the current calendar. Let's suppose that 3 a.m. is the new moon. In the current calendar, midnight is the starting point of a day, so the next day which contains the new moon 3 a.m. becomes the first day of the month. However, according to the Bible, the sunrise is the starting point of a day, so the past day, yesterday, in which the time of the new moon belongs becomes the first day of the month. According to the time method we use nowadays, the starting point of a day is midnight. But biblically it is sunrise. However, some churches argue that sunset is the starting point of the day. In calculating the date of God's feast, a lot of explanation must be followed to biblically confirm that the standard of the day is sunrise, not sunset. Let's take a look at how to calculate the sacred calendar for 2024. First, to calculate the sacred calendar for 2024, we need to find out which synodic month is the first month of the year. Then you have to make a lineup that tells you the date and time of the new moon and the full moon. Fortunately, you can search the internet for information about the synodic months of a year. You should first find out which synodic month of the above 13 rows is the month closest to the vernal equinox. The vernal equinox for 2024 is 12 hours 6 minutes and 24 seconds, and it is on March 20th. Therefore, the new moon corresponding to the third row in the image above becomes the first month of the year. In the third row of the image shown, the time of the new moon is 18 hours and 25 seconds on March 10th, so the day of March 10th is the first day of the first month based on the sunrise. Therefore, the Passover of 2024, which is the 14th day of the first month, is March 23rd. If so, the 7th month of the Bible calendar is the synodic month of the 9th row in the image shown. The time of the new moon of the 9th row is 10 hours 55 minutes and 35 seconds on September 3rd. Therefore, September 3rd is the first day of the 7th month based on the sunrise. We must keep the Feast of Trumpet on September 3rd, 2024. How to calculate the sacred calendar for 2025? Just as we did for 2024, to calculate the sacred calendar for 2025, we will also need to find out which synodic month is the first month of the year. We will then need to make a lineup that tells us the date and time of the new moon and the full moon. First, we need to find out which synodic month in the image shown is the month closest to the vernal equinox. The vernal equinox for the year 2025 is 18 hours 1 minute and 28 seconds on March 20th, so the new moon corresponding to the third row in the table above becomes the first month of the year. In the third row of this image, the The time of the new moon is 19 hours 57 minutes and 49 seconds on March 29th, so the day of March 29th is the first day of the first month based on the sunrise. Therefore, the Passover for 2025, which is the 14th day of the first month, is April 11th. The 7th month of the Bible calendar is the synodic month of the 9th row of this image. The time of the new moon on the 9th row is 4 hours 54 minutes and 6 seconds on September 22nd. So September 21st is the first day of the 7th month based on the sunrise. We must keep the Feast of Trumpet on September 21st, 2025. That concludes this study, and as always God bless you and bye for now from the Church of God Jesus Witnesses.